Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018-09-27. Story 1, Area 51, The Truth. Listen to me. Please. You have to. Have I got your attention? Good. My name's Barry. Barry May. I'm from San Diego. Until recently, I was a major player in the FBI. My name didn't show up on any lists. It was erased when I was fired. I'm staying in a generic motel, in a generic boulevard, in a generic town, in a generic area. I can't reveal my location. Even now, as I'm typing this, I'm using a VPN which makes me seem like I'm in New Zealand. But you don't care about that. You came for Area 51. So let me begin. Area 51 is not holding aliens. It's not holding some fucking monstrosity. It's holding something bigger than us all. It's holding an animal. Not one from outer space or anything. Just a run-of-the-mill, normal animal. At least it was one. It is now a fucking monstrosity. It has now killed 19 people and almost killed me. It is now a literal dinosaur. Yeah, Jurassic Park and all that, but I'm not joking. They are holding a dinosaur in Area 51. But that's not it. You see, Area 51 is just a cover-up for something bigger. You see, the dinosaur isn't used for war or anything. It's just a scientific marvel. It would be anywhere else in the continental US. Mount St. Helens was considered, but in the end it was placed where it is. Why? So the government had a case to block access to the area. And the area is what matters, not the base. The area is, as of right now, the world's largest and most volatile spirit field. You won't know what a spirit field is, huh? It's essentially a method of communication with the undead. You go there, relax, and communicate with the dead. There's only 5 known ones in the world. The first is under Area 51, the second and smallest is in the pyramids. You might have seen a glimpse of the device in the YouTube video. You have 30 days to pay me 1 million. The man filming it was terminated the next day. The third is the largest and is in Mariana Trench. Don't bother searching for it. You'll be terminated. The fourth is absolutely tiny and only just larger than the one in Egypt. It's in Pakistan, within a cave in the Himalayas. The fifth is an extremely volatile one, spread out across England. It's concentrated in a cave and is impossible to find. Literally, it moves. The spirits are friendly, much like all the others. The pyramid ones require watching over, those they're quite mischievous. Those are the major discovered ones. There are many more undiscovered fields around the world. If you've ever heard of a haunted area, that means a house is built on a very volatile spirit field. Anyway, back to Area 51. The area is the most volatile field in the world and also the largest. See, volatile ones are usually inhabited by poltergeists or demons, maybe both, but only a few per volatile field. Area 51's field has maybe 11 million spirits, all evil. That means that all of them are fighting to kill us. I have a story regarding why I left. Let me tell it. The spirits usually stick to jump scares in mirrors, moving stuff, tripping us. They're pretty nice. But one is pure evil. Straight from hell. Says he's the devil's assistant. I don't doubt that. He's killed over 500 of us, all of them violently. I barely escaped him myself. That's when I realized what they're doing with them. They're using them to torture people, criminals. I escaped and headed here. It's been just over a month now. I've got plenty more stuff to tell. See you all next time, people. Barry out. Story 2, First time metal detector, help hiding what I found? Found on a metal detector enthusiast forum. Hey guys. I always thought metal detecting was a neat hobby. It's great watching videos of guys like Aquachiga when they find Civil War artifacts or the like. I know out here in NM it's even rarer to find that kind of stuff, but I've been browsing the forum for a few months, and last week I finally broke down and got a used Fisher Gold Bug Pro, with 5DD search coil, off of eBay. I took it about 2 miles outside of Los Lunas yesterday, and after a few hours and a few pennies and nickels, the meter suddenly said that it had found gold about 1.5 feet down. That's a high-quality metal detector if it can detect that far down, so I started digging, and this is what I found. It's not gold, at least I don't think it's gold, because it's black like obsidian. Maybe there's gold inside? My 4th grade daughter says the shape is an obelisk, like the Washington Memorial. It almost looks like a sculpture. But it's really smooth, I can't even find a single scratch on it. I got out a tape measure and it is exactly 1 foot and 3 inches long and about 3.4 inches by 3.4 inches wide, except at the top, of course, since it comes to a point. I tried to weigh it on our bathroom scale, but that didn't work. If anybody has any idea what it is, I would sure appreciate it. Thank you guys. Update, thank you everybody for your feedback, but it just isn't feasible to put it back exactly where I found it. I filled in the hole before I left, which I understand is standard metal detecting etiquette. I couldn't put it back exactly where I found it even if I wanted to. Update 2, is there something you guys aren't telling me? I don't understand the urgency you guys all seem to have in your responses. Is there some unspoken rule among New Mexico metal detectors about black obelisks? Update 3, guys, I can't put it back exactly where I found it. I'm sorry, I'm an amateur, I didn't know you're supposed to carry little flags with you whenever you go out. Is that just a New Mexico thing? My buddy in North Carolina says they don't do that out there. Maybe if you guys actually talked about these sorts of things, beginners like us would know. Why the little flags? Update 4, since nobody is actually giving me any details about what I found and is just telling me to put it back exactly where I found it, I'm just going to call the UNM History Department. I'm really disappointed in you guys. I would have expected you to be more forthcoming and detailed with someone who was new to all of this. The other metal detecting forums I follow from other states might not have a clue what I found, but they are all polite and supportive and they all seem to think that you guys are very rude. I'm just sort of disillusioned. Update 4, no, I'm not going to delete my messages about the obelisk on the other forums. And might I add, the history department was about as useful as you all. I've lived in New Mexico for 6 years and I've always thought everybody here was very nice, way more relaxed than people back east. I guess I was wrong. Update 5, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the way I acted, guys. I was wrong, you were right, and I deleted my messages on the other forums. I buried it out in the desert this morning. I'm not sure if it's exactly where I found it, but I really hope and pray that's enough. I think it's really close. I think that the bush I buried it next to is the same one. Update 6, it came back. Please, I need anybody's advice. Please. It doesn't have to be on the forum, you can message me directly or call/text me at 500-534-X. Please. Update 7, why aren't any of you answering me? Please help. Update 8, please. Story 3, my mother should have been home by now. I live at the end of a long, windy road. It takes us about 10 minutes to drive down it, sometimes more. It's a dirt road, with tall trees to either side. We own the land all up and down it, so there are no other houses along the road. We never stray off the path, we never get out of the car, and we never drive it at night. Our property was surrounded by an electric fence, and a sturdy gate across the road. We don't have guests over and we are very strict with our no trespassing rules. But tonight something is wrong. My mom had to go out for something. I don't remember what. I was doing homework when she told me. She left around 5, and it wasn't until the chimes went off from the living room that I realized I hadn't heard her in the house for some time. Those chimes have been there for as long as I can remember. They go off at sundown, and that's our reminder not to travel down the road or stray into the woods. I jumped out of my seat and hurried into the living room. It was empty. The chimes had stopped ringing, but I could still hear them in my head. I went to the window and pushed the curtains to the side. My car was still there, but my mom's was not. I don't know why we've never been allowed to stray from the house after nightfall, but the ominous shadows that the trees cast reminded me of the fear that has been ingrained into me for years. I grabbed my phone from my room and checked to see if I missed any messages from her. Crap. My car broke down in the driveway. I need you to come get me ASAP. Are you coming? I've only got half an hour before nightfall, hurry. Come get to me now. It's too late. I'm spending the night in the car. Lock all the doors and windows. If you hear anything, don't investigate. I'll see you in the morning. I love you, never forget that. Crap crap crap. My mother was stuck on the driveway, a many-mile-long driveway, and I'd essentially stranded her there. I looked outside again. The darkness had fallen quickly, but I could still see across the yard fairly well. I couldn't make her stay out there all night, right? I mean, that's been the one main rule in my house since I was born. Don't go outside after sunset. I didn't know what happens after sunset, I just knew it couldn't be good. I always assumed it was some kind of wildlife, but I never actually saw what was so dangerous out there. At least, not until tonight. I tried calling my mom, but the signal wouldn't let the call go through. Instead, I sent my mom a text. Sorry. I just saw these. I'm coming to get you. Immediately her typing bubble popped up and a second later her text came through. No. Absolutely not. Stay home. Stay safe. Don't go outside. I looked outside the window. It was almost completely dark, but I could still see where the trees started. We have an electric fence surrounding our yard, and motion sensor cameras and lights set up everywhere. One time I remember there had been something that had set off the cameras and lights. The next morning I'd walked in on Mom watching the footage. She turned off the screen and quickly ushered me out of the room, but not before I caught a glimpse of what was on it. It looked like a man, probably middle-aged. The video quality was poor and my glimpse was so brief I couldn't make out any details, but I do know that something was unsettling about it. Something was off about that man. When I'd asked about who was trespassing, Mom just told me not to worry about it and called the company who did our fencing. I was torn. Mom told me to leave her, but what if something happened to her? Her texts were urgent, and I knew something was wrong in our woods. Something dangerous. But this was my mom. Whatever was out there, I couldn't leave her. I grabbed my keys and went to the door. My stomach was queasy and there was some sort of lump in my throat, but I ignored it. I took a timid step outside and gently closed the door behind me. I'd been outside at night before, but my mom was always home. It was never for more than 5 minutes, and I never went past the fencing. Honestly, I'd barely been outside of the light cast from the porch and windows. I told myself that didn't matter and climbed into the car. Somehow I felt both safer and like I was even closer to danger. I quickly slid the keys into the ignition and started the car. My headlights came on and I sighed in relief. The light was like my safety blanket. As long as there was light, there was hope, even if I was surrounded by darkness. I slowly pulled away from my house and started down the driveway. Our long, twisty, horrible driveway. The ride was bumpy and slow. I was going slowly for a few reasons. Firstly, I'd never driven this road at night. In fact, I've driven at night only about 20 times in my life, and I wasn't coming home those nights. Secondly, the road is unpaved and I can't remember where all the holes are. Finally, I don't want to accidentally hit an animal, or my mom, or my mom's car. I drove the first 2 miles without seeing anything. I don't know where Mom broke down, but she had to be far enough away that walking would be too risky. I kept going. 2 more miles. Then 2 more. Nothing. Another 2, still no sign of her or anything. Finally, I reached the gate. I never saw her and I never passed her car. There was no way I could have missed her. Our driveway was only wide enough for 1 car to be on it at a time, and it was lined on both sides with not only tall trees but a single string of barbed wire. There was no way I'd driven past her. Maybe she wasn't on the driveway. Maybe she'd broken down somewhere else and I'd just messed it up in my head. I pulled out my phone and checked the messages. I read them once, then read them again just to be sure. My car broke down in the driveway. She had to be there. But she wasn't. My stomach was starting to fold in on itself, and I looked anxiously out my window at the dark trees that surrounded me. For the first time, I locked the doors. There was just enough space here for me to turn the car around, so I did, and I began the slow trek back to my house. I had only gone about a mile when I noticed something moving out of the corner of my eye. My entire body filled with dread, and I could feel the blood draining into the lowest parts of my body. But still, my head kept saying it could be my mom, even when the entire rest of me said I should keep going no matter what. I forced my foot to press on the brake and my car came to a stop. Whatever was moving out there was just out of clear eyesight. It hovered just outside of the headlights, in the shadows of the trees. I was somewhat aware, in the back of my mind, that there was no car around, and nowhere to hide a car. It was hard to see exactly what was moving out there. I forced my head to turn and my eyes to focus on it. It was tall, on 2 feet, but too small to be a bear. I wish it was a bear. I watched in frozen terror as the thing came into the light. It was a man, I think. It was shaped like a man. Maybe it was the lights, but his skin was pale, like almost white. His clothes were dirty and his mouth was slightly open. He slouched, and as he drew closer, I saw that he walked with a funny lurch. But that wasn't what was truly horrifying. His eyes were gone. It looked like they'd been clawed out, perhaps recently, as his face glistened with fresh blood. Or maybe he clawed at his face regularly, because the gaping holes were much bigger and went farther back than they would have if just his eyes were gone. But it looked like most of his face had been torn. There was a dark stain on his hands, as if he'd done it to himself. I don't know. All I know is that I slammed on the gas and drove as fast as I dared back home. I jumped out of my car and raced inside, where I locked every window and door into the house. My mom still isn't home. I'm not sure where she is. There is one thing I'm almost certain about, though. I think I passed at least 2 other figures on the hectic drive back. One was small, and one was about the size and shape of my mother. Story 4, Sarah's Necklace. Hey, my name is Jack and I'm 27. I live in New York. I'm a pretty regular student. I've got a shitty part-time job in a cheap convenience store. I go to college and I try to work out like 3 times a week, even though I spend most of the time in the gym shit talking to my friends. I suppose it's still socializing, which is good. I've got 2 best friends, Chris and Marcus. They're like polar opposites. Chris is energetic and loud and constantly talking, but a little fast to act and not the brightest, while Marcus is quiet and conservative while he has an exceptional IQ and just all-round great problem-solving skills and common sense. Then there's me. I'm directly in the middle. I can be fun and quiet depending on my mood, and I'm no brain box, but I'm far from stupid. My friends are everything to me, but neither of them matches up to Sarah. I met Sarah when I was 16 at a party. We knew a couple of each other's mutual friends and we just hit it off straight away. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen, and I'm usually confident when it comes to talking to girls, but this time I was truly frozen. I remember after the party I walked her home. We were drunk and pretty stoned too. So we stopped and sat on a bench in the local park. It was about 2 in the morning when I turned to her and kissed her for the first time that night. I'm not one for cliches, but to say I fell in love at that very moment would be an understatement. I had kissed upwards of 30 or 40 girls at this point in my life, and nothing ever compared to how this felt. We met in that park every second or third day for about a month. Just sat on the bench and talked about random stuff. It was about a month and a half later I invited her for a meal and I asked her the big question, to which she blushed like hell, and thankfully she said yes. And that's where it all began. We'd do everything together, and we never got sick of each other's company either. We would go on these walks for hours on end and just talk about everything: the universe, the afterlife, religion, murderers, rapists, Crazy people, bands, music, movies, food, you name it, and we never seemed to run out of ideas for a new amazing conversation. I remember every day thinking to myself, it feels like I've fallen in love all over again every single day with this girl. She is the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. There was plenty of favorite things I had about Sarah. One was the way her nose wrinkled when I made her laugh. Another was how she'd sometimes wink at me if we were in a group of friends or family without anyone noticing, and my favorite thing of all was her necklace that she wore all the time. It was gold with a little purple stone in the end. The color purple became our color because of the necklace. Things were going as good as they could be up until our 6th-year anniversary. We had a date plan where we drive out to a restaurant we heard about, and then drive up to NYC and stay in a nice hotel. It was our anniversary after all. We heard the restaurant we were going to had the best wings in New York, so obviously we were pretty excited. We finished the meal and it was perfect. We began to drive towards the city. I looked down at the radio and ironically our song had just come on. I called the radio station when I was in the restaurant's toilet, but Sarah thought it was a coincidence, so I let her believe the magic. We were singing along to the song when boom, the car flipped out of nowhere after striking something on the side of the road. I heard a crack and then everything went dark. The next few hours were a blur. I remember seeing and hearing sirens and feeling the sensation of being lifted. Then I woke up in the hospital with Sarah sitting up on her bed next to mine. She had bandages around her head and a cast on her arm. She told me I had broken my leg and she had broken her arm and we had both gotten mild concussions, but thankfully the way the car landed we were extremely lucky. We both lay side by side in the hospital beds for around 3 days, doing what we always do, laughing and insulting people who walked by, flirting jokingly and making sex jokes. Then we both got discharged. I remember that night, the one after we got discharged, feeling the same feeling towards Sarah that I felt back when I was 16, as I laid beside her in bed feeling her body on mine. I knew there was no other place on this planet I'd rather be. I had a plan and I knew she was going to love it. I was going to propose. I bought the ring and told Sarah I needed to talk to her about a vacation we'd been planning. I told her we were going to a travel agency, but I actually drove her to the park we shared our first kiss in. I held her hand and said, Sarah, since I met you all those years ago my life hasn't been better. I never told you, but you completely cured anxiety and depression from my mind and you changed my life forever. She began to tear up and smile. I got down on one knee and said, that's why I need to ask you this. Before the words left my mouth, she said yes and hugged me, crying and kissing my neck. And then she said, Jack, I want you to have this, as she took off her golden necklace and placed it around my neck. As soon as I heard the click of it closing I fell into darkness, the same sort of darkness I saw after the car crash. He's waking up quickly, he's awake, his vitals are showing he's coming back. I was in the hospital. They told me I had been in a coma for 3 months. I looked to the bed to my left where I thought Sarah had been sitting and it was empty. Where is she? I asked as I started to tremble. We're very sorry, Jack, she didn't make it. She died on impact the night of the crash 3 months ago. We were engaged, we were going to get married. I proposed in the park. I repeated over and over and began to cry uncontrollably. Everyone tried to calm me down, but nothing worked, until one thing caught my attention. I felt down around my chest and there it was. The necklace that Sarah had never ever taken off regardless of what she was doing was on my neck. Its golden glow and purple stone stared back up at me. She was wearing it the night of the crash and according to my parents she was buried in it. It's been a few years now and I decided to tell my story. I'm now happily married with a girl named June. She doesn't know much about my past apart from the fact I was in a car crash. I couldn't bring myself to talk about the truth before today. I also told her the golden necklace I never take off is just special to me and I never went into detail about it. I don't think I'll ever love someone as much as I loved her back then, back when I was 16, and we were free. I've got to finish writing now and go pick up my daughter from kindergarten, my beautiful daughter who we named Sarah. Story 5, I used to love the rain. I used to love the rain. The soft pitter-patter of the raindrops on our roof. The distant sound of the low, rumbling thunder, the cracks of lightning that would light up the sky in an awesome brightness for only a fraction of a second. These were always calming to me. Now, they evoke a different response. It was a normal Sunday night. My wife and I always go to bed around 9:30 p.m. This is ideal, because it's the same time that my 15-month-old gets really sleepy. I try to get at least 8 hours of sleep every night, so that I can fight through my 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shifts at work. On this particular night, I knew there was a storm coming, and I was excited about that, because storms help me sleep. The only reason I didn't sleep through this storm was because I was awakened by the loud sound of our power going out around 4 a.m. This is not an uncommon occurrence, but one that still surprises me every time it happens. I got up to go turn our bedroom's oscillating fan back on, and looked out of the window through my tired eyes. I was about to turn around and get back in bed, when I saw him. In front of my house is a fairly big yard, with a narrow road passing in front of it. There is only one streetlight among the multiple houses on this road, and it sits right at my yard's edge. Because of that light, I was able to see that there was someone standing, completely still, on the other side of the road. The rain was bouncing off of his hood, which left enough of a shadow on his face for me to not see what he looked like. He was fairly tall, but not slender, with a stance that would make anyone uncomfortable, arms at his side, slightly raised, as though he was about to fight someone. I couldn't take my eyes away, and within a few seconds of noticing him, my front yard was illuminated by a nearby flash of lightning. Then the man was gone. Still very confused by what had happened, I lingered at the window for a few minutes. Another lightning bolt danced across the forest across the street, and when that light subsided, there he was again. Only this time, he was on the side of the street closest to my house, still in the same stance. At this point I was trembling, and couldn't even move enough to wake my wife, because as my eyesight began to clear up, I saw that this man was holding a shiny, silver knife in his right hand, gripped tightly with aggression and malice. The storm would not let up, and the lightning kept coming, one strike after another. I sat there as this figure was moving closer and closer to my front door. Never changing stance, never letting go of the knife, never taking his focus away from my house. When the lightning strike occurred that brought the man to my front porch, the storm calmed enough that the lightning struck one more time, and then ceased entirely. I couldn't see the man anymore, and hoped that he had disappeared forever. My trembling and anxiety subsided, and I made my way over to my bed, kissed my wife on the forehead, and decided to go get some water from the kitchen. As I walked from our bedroom to the kitchen, I saw something at the front entryway of our home that still sends shivers down my spine to this day. The front door was open, just cracked enough for someone to slide through, and there was no one in sight. I was sure that I locked it. It was a nervous habit of mine to lock and deadbolt it every night before bed. I locked it back, but couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in this house, there is someone waiting. Waiting for the next strike of lightning from a storm to make his move. Next time it rains, I'm not going to sleep. Story 6, you know me. I work in a bank. How boring it truly is. I spend my days giving people their money and taking their money to deposit in the safe. I advise people on mortgages. I advise people on loans. I eat my lunch at 12:30, sat in the staff room making small talk with Janice, another customer service operative. She bores me to tears talking about her children. I feel like grabbing her by her generic blue blazer and screaming in her face that I don't care. I imagine my spit hitting her bland face. But instead I nod and smile, making all the right noises as though I'm listening intently. The only person more boring is Colin from accounts. Luckily he isn't on my lunch break. He has his lunch earlier. I think I'd actually end up stamping on his head until it's a bloody pulp if I had to listen to that daft cunt. I am working on Janice. Her husband isn't supportive. You deserve better, I say. Then go on to list all the ways I'm a fantastic partner. At 34 I'm a good-looking guy. I know this. I have a charm people love. And I've seduced many a woman and even the occasional man. They fall for me, telling me I look like Johnny Depp when he was young. They fall for me, and before long they are eating up my subconscious seeds. You want me. You will leave your partner for me. I'll be a great partner. I'll be a great stepdad. I'll love you more than anyone else ever has. I'm amazing. You love me. And no doubt they all believe I love them. A bit of attention here and there. A small thoughtful gift once in a while. You feel special. You feel listened to. You feel valued. My smile reels you in, little fish. I show my vulnerable side. I cry on your shoulder about how my mum never loved me. My dad used to beat me, and I bounced around foster homes until I made something of myself. Hook, line and sinker. With my smile you melt. And I can see your very soul swoon before me. Not many men look as good as me. Not many can talk as well as me. Nobody dresses as cool as me. Nobody is as interesting. I'm your ideal man. Love me. Love me. Love me. Within months you are with me. Cheating on your partner. Cheating on your kids. Cheating on all you hold dear. That poor bastard sat at home thinking you are working late. Those poor kids waiting for you to get home. Whilst you are out here with me. Your ego soars at having me. You feel wonderful and disregard everything you cared about. Rolling the dice that I'm better than all you previously had. Men and women fall in the same way. Stupid cunts. We will plan our life together. It will be a heady 6 months of exciting dreams and crazy fantasies. Passion and lust. You are intoxicated. You weak-willed fucks. 6 months is all I can stand. Then I move in the evening after telling you I don't feel well, so just want to go to bed early. The messages to your partners on social media will be short and concise. They already know really what's going on. The screenshots of your messages just prove it. I'll look at both of your social media for a few days. Smiling at the sad posts. Broken homes. Divorce. Kids shipped from home to home. I smile. I block you all. I go to my new job in a new town. I make new connections. More will fall in love with me. More will risk everything they have for this bullshit fantasy of Prince Charming saving them from the monotony of monogamy. Whilst you aspire to love and be loved, I aspire to be insidious. Moving slowly with a toxic malevolent purpose. The original wolf in sheep's clothing. The twisted gangrenous rotting fists in a velvet glove. I look so amazing because I never age. I have been here amongst you for centuries. You can see my 6 brothers at work in different ways. Wrath, pride, envy, greed, sloth and gluttony. We work amongst you insidiously. The obesity crisis. The war in the Middle East. The booming vacuousness of cesspits of pride that is social media. We inspire you. You fall before us like ants before their hills. We will destroy many or few. Whatever takes our desire. Unlike you, we aren't weak. As old as we are. I've taken down politicians. Destroyed political regimes. I've torn apart families, and whilst I cannot claim the sheer carnival of downpourings of cluster bombs and white phosphorus as my older brother can, I destroy in different ways. I twist minds. Lust. My reaches go far beyond these low-level affairs and broken homes. My tentacles reach through millions of computer screens, sucking you in. You started out jerking off to vanilla shit 10 years ago. Now you cannot even feel excitement without watching some seriously twisted shit. Lust. The seedy brothels where Eastern European women are shipped in and held captive like battery hens. The red light districts. The perverts. The pornographers. The priests. You. Anyone. Will kneel to me at my command. Next customer please, I say and smile. I'm the most beautiful woman you have ever seen. And in the brief interaction of me scanning your groceries, you cannot stop thinking about me all week. Story 7, Blight. Harry Sanders lay on the cracked asphalt of Highway 82, propped up on his elbows with his binoculars held to his face. It was a bright, clear day, the sun having burned away the thin mountain mist that had enveloped him as he walked down the road to his vantage point. He had a crystal clear view of the small town that lay below him, and he scanned it, searching for the telltale signs that the blight had reached this little corner of the world. He could see no bursts of green or sudden growths on the buildings, no covered mounds in the street to indicate where a person had fallen, never to get up. The growths he scanned for with fear and dread, were no different from normal plants. Chemically and biologically, they were identical to every other plant on Earth. Except regular plants didn't generally sprout up overnight, or sprout from the bodies of people who had died in their sleep. He remembered the first image he had seen of the Blight's victims. Grainy and shaky footage, probably shot on an old cell phone, showing a layer of grass covering the human-shaped hump, like a layer of green hair. Clumps of plants growing from the grass like warts. For all he had viewed it, the mute, alien horror had not diminished, and he shuddered at the images his mind called forth. There was no sign of the panic that had gripped the cities like raging fevers, no smashed storefronts, no glass decorating the sidewalks like twinkling carpets, no destroyed, burnt-out cars, strewn across the road like the castaway toys of a spoiled giant. No pools of blood or rotting bodies with gaping holes stitched across them. Everything looked normal. The only indication that something was wrong was the lack of people. Usually, the town, in spite of its small size, was buzzing with people coming and going, doing their shopping or other business, catching up with friends, living and doing all the things that people did. Now, it was empty, completely devoid of life. There wasn't even so much as a breeze to stir the trash in the gutters into life. It felt like someone had removed all the people, then paused time on the town, capturing it in a bubble out with reality. It was as silent and as still as a grave, and Harry suspected that if he were to take a walk down the road and into town and venture into one of the stores or houses, he would find green, vaguely human-shaped humps in those rooms. He suspected he would find out that the town he stared down at was a grave site. If he did go down, he would seal his own fate, but at least he'd know what had happened to everyone. He'd know if it was safe to drive through the town and beyond. To escape his prison, and see if his brother was still alive. The thought of his brother and his family sent hot wires of dread and panicky fear through his stomach. He had been thinking about them a lot recently, but without the characteristic anger and hate that usually colored his feelings towards him. The approach of the Blight, and the certain death that came with it, brought all of the old grudges and resentments out into the light and made him see them for what they were: stupid, petty and wasteful. He hoped they were okay. With the phone lines down and mobile reception non-existent, the only way he would know would be if he traveled down from his mountain perch and saw for himself. And to do that was death. He set his binoculars down, resisting the urge to throw them over the edge, and placed his head in his hands. The despair, fear and loneliness he had been pushing down inside himself for the past 3 weeks came rushing up, the pressure too much. The thoughts of his brother, and lying in the dust, watching a dead town for the past hour, had shifted the well cap on his emotion, and it surged up in a torrent. A single sob escaped from him before he got himself under control. He angrily fisted the tears away, and lay there, breathing heavily. He sincerely hoped he was wrong, that his brother and the people below had done the same thing as he had done when the news broke: hunker down, wait for the storm to pass, come out when it was over. Except, it didn't look like it would ever end. The Blight jumped quarantine lines with a speed and ease that was horrifying and amazing in equal measure, and it seemed like nothing could stop it. It had already spread so far. He hoped the cold slowed its progress, and he'd be safe in his cabin for a few more days at least. He was sure he had heard somewhere that altitude and the cold did weird things to viruses. He hoped that wasn't some pseudo-scientific fact, and had a basis in truth. Otherwise, rather than save himself, he had only extended his sentence. Pushing himself up off the road, he dusted himself off. Looking upwards, he shielded his eyes from the sun and scanned the sky. The azure canvas was unmarked by cloud, natural or man-made. He lowered his head, and started back up the road towards his cabin. The binoculars stared sightlessly at the empty town from their place in the dust, like a pair of giant, impassive eyes. Harry sat hunched at the old, pockmarked table, and slowly twisted the dial on the radio set. He clutched the square microphone like a drowning man clutching a life ring, ready to bring it to his lips should he hear anyone on the other end. So far, nothing but static had come through the airwaves. He thought he had heard a voice, faint and garbled, but he wasn't sure if it had been real or his imagination. When he had turned the dial back, the same monotone blare of static answered him. As the little red needle climbed higher and higher through the numbers, so too did his desperation and fear, but he forced himself to go slowly through the dials with all the care and concentration of a mother nursing an infant. The number of people on the waves had been diminishing steadily as the blight continued its rampaging course, claiming more victims. Harry was beginning to think he might be the last man on Earth, when a voice finally came through, and his heart lurched, and it's reached Monroeville, folks. This'll be the last broadcast of the Wildman. A few of my neighbors have already bitten it. I can see the greenery from here, the mounds. Fucking plants. Guess those rumors weren't true. I'm tempted to go out and burn 'em with only my flamethrowers, but if nukes ain't gonna put a dent in them, what chance have I got? The voice sighed heavily. It came through the tinny speakers sounding like the wind through bones. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, less strident. Never thought fucking plants would be the downfall of humanity. Plants. Not in a million years. I prepped for nuclear holocaust, the one world government taking over. Stockpiled weapons and ammo, food and water. Built my bunker. Never saw this coming, not in my wildest dreams. I guess those government pukes didn't either, from the way they carried on. Silence descended as the man paused. Harry could guess what he was thinking. I think I'll just leave 'em, folks. No point, and I don't wanna go out stinking of gas. After I'm done here, I'm gonna go out to where my mom and pop are resting, and stay there a while. Be with them at the end. If you'll have loved ones, hold them close tonight. You'll be good to one another. Harry had heard this man before. There had been more voices at the time, and he had never listened to him. The man's tirades about government interference and other conspiracy theories had been too much for Harry. Now, though, it seemed as though the man had mellowed considerably, as if the blight reaching him had swept all the nonsense away. Harry listened to the man, the mic held loosely in one hand, not wanting to interrupt this last soliloquy. The man's southern accent was soothing, and he was content to sit and listen as the man spoke about his life. After about half an hour, the man sighed again, and said, "Well, I think that's me, folks. About talked myself dry here, and time's getting on. I'm gonna leave my bunker open. If anyone actually survives this thing, they might need the food or ammo. If not, it'll get reclaimed quicker. Everything goes back into the earth. It seems this is the Wildman, signing off for the last time. Peace." There was a faint click, and then nothing but dead air came through the speaker. He was gone. Rather than cycle through the last few bands, Harry turned the radio off, and sat in the stool. Other than the rhythmic sound of his breathing and the gentle ticking of the gas lantern, the cabin was silent. He contemplated what the Wildman had said, turning the words over in his mind like a stone in his hands. Like the Wildman, he too had never suspected that the fall of humanity would come around in this manner. If pressed, he would have said the downfall of humanity would have been violent and bloody, like nuclear war or through a mutated flu virus. God knew there were enough things that could have destroyed humanity. The news liked to trot them out daily. His mind grappled, not for the first time, with what happened when people fell asleep. The concepts were slippery and sticky at the same time, and it was more like a curse from a fantasy novel than anything else. Doctors and scientists were at a loss to explain the blight, let alone treat it. They could only watch with impotent horror as the world and everything they loved turned green and life sprouted from the corpses of the dead. Before the TVs had winked out like closing eyes, and on his nightly travels through the bands on his radio, he had heard preachers and other religious figures offer explanations of what was happening. Like the doctors and scientists, as the blight spread and grew, so did their hysteria, and their explanations and entreaties to God grew increasingly more desperate. The blight claimed both the righteous and the wicked, the rich and poor. It cut them down like a merciless scythe. He shuddered and pushed the thoughts away. Whatever it was, and wherever it came from, was a mystery that was unlikely to ever be solved now. And in the end, did it matter? Restless, He stood, picking up the lantern. Shadows danced across the walls like capering sprites as he lifted it and moved through the cabin. The soft, orange light illuminated the neat rows of books, arrayed in their shelves like soldiers in ranks. A fair few of them had his name on the spine, and he had looked at them with savage pride, once upon a time. Now, they were almost forgotten. Harry opened the door and stepped out into the warm night. He sat the lantern down on the porch, and leaned against the wooden railing. Save for a few animal noises, the silence was all-consuming. The silence summed up the absence of humanity. He wanted to scream and shout, to break the silence and fill the void, but at the same time, the silence had a weight, an almost holy, sacred feel, and to break it would be sacrilege. As he stared out into the night, Harry considered his options. He could stay here, in the mountains. He had enough food to last him a while longer, and, if he rationed it, it would last even longer. Water was no issue either, his well was still good, the water still sweet. If he stayed here, he would live. At least until the last voice went out on the radio, and the feelings of despair and loneliness, which had been slowly building in him like rising mercury, finally got too much, and he put a bullet in his head. He could venture down the mountain and go into town. That would potentially satisfy two needs: to see where everyone was, and to talk to someone, to break the fast of his isolation. Maybe he'd find someone alive down there, and they could help each other. Or maybe he'd find everyone covered in plants, and as soon as he went to sleep, he'd suffer the same fate. The other option would be to pack up his truck, book it through town and several hundred miles of roads, almost surely clogged with abandoned cars, race towards his brother's house and see what had become of his last remnants of his family, to try and make amends before it was truly too late. Memories of the event that had driven the wedge between them surfaced in his mind like revenants from their graves. The copious amounts of alcohol, the tiny comment, blown out of all proportion, distorted and magnified through the lenses of drunkenness. The shouting, the anger, boiling over like churning water, the fists. Harry, nose bloodied and eye swelling, being hauled off his snarling, screaming brother. The words, screamed by a snarling beast that had been his brother moments ago, and which closed the door so firmly on their otherwise good relationship. John's wife and children, looking on in horror. A gallery of other faces, viewed through a blurry prism of tears, blurring as a relative pulled him away from the scene. Harry came back to a reality that doubled then tripled before his eyes. His tears fell into the silence like tiny raindrops. That had been 10 years ago, and he hadn't spoken to his brother since. There had been times when he had thought about bridging the gap, but he had always thought that he shouldn't be the one to apologize first. He had been a fool, and now it might be too late. There were rumors that some people weren't affected by the plague. He had heard people on the radio say that some survived what should have been their last sleep. But he thought they were just that, rumors. No chance a whole family could be immune. He gazed out into the blackness. Maybe they were alive, maybe they weren't. If he stayed here, he'd never know. A desperate, sickening pain filled his heart, burning like a fire in his core. It grew until he was sure it would consume him like a piece of kindling. He had to try. To bury the hatchet, to put away the sword. To see what had become of his last remaining family. He would leave in the morning, load up his truck, put his foot down and pray that the roads were halfway clear. No stopping until he made it, no sleeping. He took a breath, and felt the maelstrom inside him calm. After weeks of frustration, of not knowing and indecision, now that he had a plan, he felt a weight lift off him. To stay here was death. Death of his character, and death of his soul. He had to know. But, even if he found them dead, maybe he could do something for someone else. Maybe he could help someone. Harry turned, and walked back into the cabin. Beams of morning sunlight filtered through the cabin's dusty windows, casting slanting bars of sunlight across the desk. Harry sat before the radio, like a postulant before an altar, wondering how to begin what was sure to be his first and last broadcast on the radio. He held the square microphone in one hand, and his other drummed incessantly on the desk like a small, agitated animal. Behind him, Sitting in the cabin's small courtyard, was his truck. Tall trees surrounded the squat vehicle like huge sentries, protecting the truck and the various packages Harry had loaded into it. He had thought to just take the truck and go, to travel light. But he thought that, if his brother and family were still alive, they'd be grateful for the supplies. He brought the mic up to his mouth, thumbed the talk button on the mic, froze and released it. He did the same thing a few times more, pausing at the last moment each time. Talking on the open waves was never something he enjoyed. Even now, at the end of the world, it seemed as though these small hang-ups still had power over him. Sighing, realizing he was wasting daylight for no good reason, he took a deep breath, brought the mic up once again, and pressed the button. Calling anyone still alive out there. My name is Harry Sandler, GPS coordinates. He looked at the GPS and rattled off his coordinates. That's the location of my cabin, which I'm leaving today. If you need supplies, or shelter, and can make it up here, make yourself at home. It's halfway up a mountain, but the blight hasn't came up this far. Maybe the cold affects it, I don't know. There's no guarantees in this world anymore, but I think you'd be safe here. I'm leaving today to see my brother. We both fucked up big time, and haven't seen each other in a long time. I just hope it's not too late to make amends. There's rumors that some people might be immune from whatever this is. I hope that's true. Not just for their sakes, but for all of humanity. He paused, unsure what to say next. Time seemed to slow and tick by as he sat still. Outside, a bird sang, its call echoing through the forest. After a moment of thought, he pressed the button that would broadcast his voice, and continued. I don't have any answers or explanations for what's happened to us. I don't think anyone on Earth could explain it. All I know is that if you've got loved ones, appreciate them whilst you can. You never know what might happen. And, if you are one of the lucky ones who's survived so far, survive a little longer. For all our sakes. He rattled off his coordinates again, hung up the mic and stood. Harry took a deep breath, and let it out. Fear and tension were worming their way around his nerves, but he still felt better than he had done in weeks. Before, he had felt directionless, like a ship with its sail and rudder broken, drifting aimlessly through a sea of horror and sadness. Now, even though he didn't know what he'd face on his journey, he felt better. He picked up his backpack, which lay resting against one of the legs of the table, and walked to the door of the cabin. Opening the door and stepping over the threshold, he looked back at his home. Motes of dust danced in the beams of sunlight spilling in through the windows, giving the place a warm and cozy feel. He thought it would make a good home for someone. The engine noise faded as the truck and its master wove their down the mountain. Their journey started. Soon, the only sounds left were the singing of birds and the wind rustling the trees as the last vestige of humanity left their solitary outpost. Inside the cabin, as the sun began to set, the motes of dust became slow and lethargic, as if, having danced and played in the beams all day, they were now growing tired. As the sun lowered, the light moved, playing across the books that stood patiently on their shelf, awaiting a new pair of hands to turn their pages, a new mind to get lost within them. On the scarred table, the radio sat, its illuminated dials staring out into the cabin like a pair of open eyes. As the darkness fell, it squawked, and a familiar voice came through the small speaker. Story 8, Why You Should Stay Away from r/watch people. 4 years ago, my dad let me get a Reddit account. That's not to say that I didn't already have one, because I did. But I kept the NSFW posts hidden, out of respect. When my dad got me a new email and set everything up for me, I figured it'd be okay to share those posts. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I'm probably just going to use it for porn. Which, for the better part of my single life, I'll admit, was true. Point being, it wasn't all I used it for, and I'm sure to understand as much from the title. My dad, being a little, okay, maybe a lot, morbid in his choices of entertainment, introduced me to r/watch people. He told me stories of how a man would be driving his car, drunk, and would plow into the occasional elderly pedestrian. But it was never more severe than that. There was never really any gore. So, my impression of the subreddit was rather mild. I figured, watch people meant that it was car accidents, people dying at work, and the like. When I turned the NSFW filter off, I realized nothing could be further from the truth. I'd scroll through and see GIF after GIF of executions, fatal car accidents, bombings, suicides. At first I couldn't handle it all. I kept off Reddit for months, because it was all over my feed. After a while, I got back on, out of intrigue. I tried to look at everything in moderation, and it worked. In 3 months I was desensitized to it all. Looking at a POW get his brains blown out, or watching a head-on collision wouldn't faze me. Just another part of my innocence stripped away. On my 17th birthday, my family and I went out to Colorado for a winter getaway. I'd always loved that little cabin in the Rockies. Despite the weather, I felt at peace there. Like the solemnity of the freezing cold was a comfort. Because of that, I always downloaded a few books. That time, I'd gotten The Expanse series, by James S. A. Corey. When we got there, the tall wooden building seemed older. I mean, it had been a year since I'd last been there, but that was hardly a reason for noticeable age. Anyway, I got my bag out of the car and headed up the stairs, only to find that my dad had forgotten the keys to the house, all the way back in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So we were sat outside in the cold for the hour and a half it took for my dad drive into town and hire someone to pick the lock. Eventually, though, we got in. My dad expressed to my mother how sorry he was to have forgotten something so important. She forgave him, and that was the end of it. After eating lunch, I went up to my room and put my phone to charge. The cabin had a stable Wi-Fi connection, so I planned on texting my friends and maybe scrolling through Instagram later. But I remember feeling tired, so I napped. It's funny, you know, how dreams work. Some of them you can remember for years afterward. Most fade into the void that is your memory. It was raining. In my dream, I mean. I remember that part more vividly than anything else. The dark clouds filled the sky, hiding the sun. I was standing in very neat, well-kept grass. As I looked around, I began to realize where exactly I was. My sister was standing next to left of me, and someone else I didn't know was standing to my right. They were both crying. My mother was attempting to comfort my sister. There was a ring of people surrounding one big hole in the ground, some I recognized as family and family friends, others I didn't know at all. Everyone was wearing black. At that point I already had an idea about what was going on. I looked into the hole and saw a premium-made coffin being lowered in. Whoever was down there, everyone but me was mourning them. I only felt sadness, because, well, it was a funeral. Despite not knowing whose it was, death is always sad. For some reason, something I wouldn't come to understand until much later, I remember my dad's favorite song being played. For What It's Worth, by Buffalo Springfield. I woke up about an hour later in confusion. I'd had some pretty weird dreams, but something was different about this one. It felt too real for comfort. I shrugged it off, and checked the charge on my phone. It was fully charged. I took it off and checked my notifications. After texting my friends and playing with some Snapchat filters, I got a notif from Reddit. It was from r/watchpeopleD. It read, "Man shoots himself in head with shotgun, explicit footage, NSFW." Out of curiosity, I tapped the notif. It led me to a very shady website that I fail to recall the name of. On the black background, there was a video with no thumbnail. Almost hastily, I tapped on the play button. For a few seconds it buffered, but then it started playing. To my disgust and horror, the man in the video was my father. As the video played, I saw him talking about something. There was no audio, so I couldn't make it out. But I double-took what I was seeing. My dad? No. He was older, had lots of white hair. That couldn't be him. It wasn't him. But it was. And when, 30 seconds into the video, the man pulled out my dad's 12 grams Remington and loaded a shell, I knew it was him. He had started crying. Slowly, I watched my dad lower the butt of the gun to the floor, and put the barrel in his mouth. Before he could pull the trigger, I shut down the app and deleted Reddit. What the hell was that? How could that be my dad? I kept trying make sense of it, and eventually I could only rationally come to one conclusion. It wasn't him. It was just a coincidence that the man owned the same shotgun as my father. That's it. I never went back on Reddit after that. During that same month, I convinced my dad to sell his shotgun at the local gun store. He said he wouldn't be using it for hunting anytime soon, since he'd had a bad back for 5 years. Looking back now, I regret not going to the gun store with him that day. Fast forward 2 years, I was in college. I'd met a very sweet girl, Regina, who would soon be my wife. We'd been only dating then. Occasionally, I called home to make sure my family, specifically my dad, was okay. Other than that, my life was pretty carefree. I went to parties often, studied for fun, and hung out with my girlfriend. Typical college boy stuff. I'd mostly forgotten about the video I'd seen just 2 years before. My biggest concerns were how I was going to do on that advanced math test, how I was going to juggle school and social activities during that next week. I'm writing this now to warn those people subscribed to the subreddit. Until 2 days ago, I didn't know how dangerous it really was. 2 days ago, my father killed himself with his Remington 12 grams shotgun. He never sold it. He hid it in the back of the shed behind the cabin in Colorado. When I found out, those dreams and hints that the universe seemed to be giving me slipped into place. The dream, and the video, were the future. I just came back home from my father's funeral. And all the while, I had the worst deja vu imaginable. This morning I downloaded Reddit again and went to r/watchpeopleD. To my dwindling surprise, my father was the first video I saw. But I wasn't looking for that video. I was looking for the video I'd seen 4 years before. Almost with a hunger for vindication, I searched up the title that I had remembered. There were no search results. I typed in a few different variations. Nothing. Reluctantly, I went back to the subreddit and tapped on the video. This one had audio. My dad was explaining something to me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I didn't want to. Everything except the screen on my phone was still. Silent. The audio sounded muffled. Why? What happened to him? He pulled his shotgun out and placed it in his mouth, just like I remembered. I couldn't move to turn the video off. I didn't even know how I wasn't screaming. As he squeezed the trigger, tears streaming down his cheeks, I heard the explosion of the gun loud and clear. In a split second, my dad's head was gone. There was blood and brains all over the roof and the walls behind him. And, faintly, I could hear my dad's favorite song playing. Now I'm sitting here in my room with a bottle of whiskey and an FN40 I bought this morning, and I'm begging you, please, stay away from r/watchpeopleD. Story 9, he never touched me before. I'm writing this down so that I don't forget again. Some of this story happened mere minutes ago. Maybe I can avoid it next time. The date is the 26th of September 2018, and it'll be about 3 a.m. when I finish this. This is the story of how a seemingly harmless spirit from my past tried to kill me tonight. My name is Andy, and I live in a small town in southern Missouri. When I was 8 years old, my parents both decided we would be moving into my great-grandmother's house. The moment I stepped into this house, even as a child, I knew something was wrong. I just thought that it was because I didn't want to move in the first place. For a few months things seemed to be okay after we moved in, and I was about 10 by this point. We'd cleaned out the upstairs rooms, and sleeping up there didn't bother me, until I saw the man. I'd awoken, but was unable to move. I'd read about this sleep paralysis. But what scared me the most was when I panned my eyes over to the darkest corner of my room. He was about 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a wide-brimmed hat. He was wearing a long dark coat, covering most of his body. I saw him at first standing in the far corner of my room. Just staring. Not saying anything to me, just watching. After a few years of sporadic encounters, I slowly forgot about the silent man. Soon my 12th birthday had come and gone when I saw him again. But this time he was closer, still in a corner of the room, but now in the one along the wall my mattress was pushed against. Still silent, still staring. I brought him up with my mother, who is a devout Christian, and she said it was my active imagination. But my sister was different. If I ever mentioned ghosts or spirits, she would go pale and tell me to hush. Did she see him too? His visits got more frequent. I had trouble sleeping at night after I realized this fact. It wasn't long after that he would now be standing at the foot of my bed, still staring, still silent. At this point I decided to say something, sitting up and shouting at him to leave me alone, that he was scaring me and my sister and he should leave. I cowered under my blankets crying, listening for some kind of movement. When I finally had the courage to look again, he was gone. The only thing left to prove he was there were two dark, crimson-colored puddles where his feet would have been, and smears of it leading to the hall where they would stop. Now it's been nearly 8 years, and tonight I had my most horrifying encounter. I was on call with my girlfriend and it was getting real late. About 2 in the morning when I fell asleep. I tried to wake up again as she called to me. I could hear her, but my eyes refused to open. When they did I saw the familiar shape of a wide hat, and large coat. I couldn't move. For the first time since he appeared, I saw his eyes. They were a haunting, pale yellow. As soon as I made eye contact with him he grew angry, wrapping his hands around my throat and squeezing tight. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't even move to defend myself as I slowly felt my head get lighter, what little I could see in the dark getting dimmer. Andy. I'd shot up with a gasp, coughing and gasping and sobbing as my worried girlfriend's voice spoke through my headphones, telling me she'd heard my wheezing, asking if I was okay. Calming down, I told her that I was okay, and though still worried, she went back to bed. She's asleep now, but I don't think I'm going to join her anytime soon. Why, you ask? Because I swear I saw yellow eyes outside my window just now. Story 10, whose line is it anyway? Blinding lights above flash on, illuminating a red, velvet stage that opens to a crowd in front of me. The crowd's roars and applause wash across me, virtually paralyzing me with their intensity. After a few seconds of their energy, an energetic, charismatic voice blooms through the crowd. Good evening everybody and welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway? On tonight's show, nicely trimmed, Wayne Brady. Well marbled, Colin Mockery. The bits that go together to make a hot dog, Ryan Stiles. And appearing for his first-time debut since rehab, Alex Mertens. Holy shit, it's fucking Drew Carey and I'm your host Drew Carey. Come on down and let's have some fun. He exclaims as he jogs his way through the crowd to the stage, straightening his black-framed glasses along the way. I remain glued to the blue material chair, trying to remember how the hell I ended up in this situation. As hard as I try, the last thing I remember is being blinded by the studio lights. The two-piece band plays the show's intro as I look to my right and see the other 3 contestants staring ahead smiling. I start leaning over to tap Ryan on the shoulder, but stop as the movement of reaching out causes shooting pains throughout my body like I had just spent the day lifting heavy weights the wrong way. Drew speaks up again, now sitting at his desk, and welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway? The show where everything is made up and the points don't matter. The points here are kinda like Canada. He finishes, pursing his lips towards the camera with voracious laughter from the audience. A small outburst from my right makes me look over towards Colin. He has his hands extended at Drew, with a look of fake hurt on his face as Ryan consoles him. Colin. I'm just kidding around. I love Canada, just a joke, best country in the world. I rub my left hand against my eyes as I try to make sense of everything, as my right hand increases its grip around the wooden armrest. The dull soreness radiates through my body with my increasing heartbeat. I look behind me and see a canvas painted red and blue that extends up and out of my line of view for my current position. I look back at the audience but have trouble making them out through the bright lights. The back end of the room seems to be lost in the lighting as well. Suddenly applause fills the room again. Hat. That's right, we pull suggestions from the audience out of this hat here, Drew says as he pulls up a top hat in the style of an American flag from underneath his desk, and our contestants have to act out what is written on the cards. I begin looking around for any kind of stagehand or director to let them know there had been some kind of mistake when Ryan's hand suddenly loops around my arm, pulling me up to my feet towards the stage. The motion sends pangs of pain throughout my body, but I find my footing and stumble to the left side of the studio with him, facing Drew as he pulls a card from the hat. The last thing you want to say to a police officer after he walks up to your car door after an accident. The audience's laughter cuts through the expansive room again. Wayne steps forward and mimes sitting down with his hand on a wheel and looking out his window with a big smile on his face. I didn't deserve the chances everyone gave me. The audience shrieks with delight and applause as Drew lifts his glasses to wipe away tears from laughing so hard. I begin to feel a little sick from the helplessness growing inside of me. I feel so disoriented, I didn't even understand Wayne's joke. I begin looking for a director again when Ryan shoves me from behind into the center of the stage. The pain swells through me again, bringing me down to one knee with my arms wrapped around my body. I open my eyes and see everybody staring at me from the audience to Drew in complete silence, waiting. The heat from the lights mixes in with pain thudding throughout my body, causing me to sweat through my shirt. I stammer, I don't think there's been a mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. I finish, looking around for any help with my arms still held against my body. The endless crowd and contestants continue to silently stare at me, the buzzing of the lights the only sound filling the room. I'm about to push up from my kneeling position when a horrendously loud, all-encompassing gnashing noise fills the room and the stands holding the audience seems to rush towards me at an incredible speed. I hold my hands up in front of my face when the piercing noise cuts out and a noise like two wood blocks being slapped together clacks throughout the theater. Blinding lights appear before me, moving in my direction. As their distance goes from feet to inches before my face, I bring up my arms, but they roar past me and blink out into darkness. Lights above flash on, illuminating a red, velvet stage that opens to a crowd in front of me. The crowd's roars and applause wash across me. Good evening everybody and welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway? On tonight's show, nicely trimmed. Drew's back in the audience, enticing the crowd. I'm again sitting in the uncomfortable chair at the back of the stage with the expansive canvas behind my back, seeming to contain less blue than before. The three other contestants to my right sit with their backs straight against their chairs and feet square on the floor, their hands gripping the armrest tightly while the two-piece band plays on, seemingly a little out of tune. Drew begins jogging through the crowd up to us, same as ever save for a small crack in his left lens, extending just past his eye. The nausea from earlier takes hold and I lean to the right and vomit onto Ryan and the red stage. Nearly all liquid and tasted like something you'd clean a bathroom with. The convulsions rack my core, causing the pain to return in full across my body. I look up at Ryan, horrified of what his reaction would be. He sat there the same as before, back straight against the chair, gripping the armrests tightly, and staring straight ahead. Drew and the audience continue on as if nothing had happened. Love Canada, just a joke, best country in the world. I glance past Ryan towards Colin, he sits there motionless like his other cast mates. I straighten up in my chair while wiping my mouth, looking to my left for anyone to help me. Off stage, gnarled and sharp metal litter the ground out of view from the audience. I squint my eyes at it, trying to make out any kind of distinguishing features when I notice silence has filled the studio. I look back towards the front and see the audience sitting stone still, silently looking ahead while Wayne, Colin, and Ryan stood looking at each other from across the stage in front of the host's desk. Drew was the only one moving, staring angrily and directly at me, breathing heavily. I quickly get to my feet, the pains traveling throughout my body as I do, and lumber forward to stand in the vacant spot next to Ryan, still covered in my vomit from earlier. The room came back to life in an instant. The crowd cheers and Drew turns away from me to the audience, and for this next bit we're going to need 2 volunteers from the audience. Drew vamps on, scanning the endless crowd from his desk. Let's see you. And you. He points to opposite ends of the gallery. However, two people stand up from the front center and begin walking up to the stage. Had I just not thrown up, the sight of them would have made me do it now. From what could be seen, the audience volunteers were an older woman and a young girl, but their joints bent at weird angles and their faces seemed to be glued back together after being smashed with a shovel. Dried blood covered nearly every visible parts of their bodies, parts of which sported deep cuts that offered glimpses of things no living person wanted on display. With every step they took, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. I look back to the center of the stage. The other contestants had again moved without being seen and stood uniform and rigid behind two black stools. The two women sit down and turn their ruined faces to me, immediately followed by the audience doing the same. As I scan the crowd, their faces begin to fill in. They were all people I recognized throughout my life. Family. Friends, some from high school, some from the nightclub. They all displayed anger, sadness, or pity. Drew's voice once again cuts through this once for our newcomer, Alex. My gaze snaps back towards the host, both of his lenses are now shattered from each end of their frames. Parents, you might want to have the kids go into the other room for this one, we're trying something different tonight. Pain screams through my front as someone slams an object into it. Ryan had appeared next to me while I wasn't looking and shoved something against my chest. My vomit had begun to dry on him and he reeked of sickened vodka. My hands push up through the hurt and grab onto the item. I look down to see he had pushed a handgun into my grip. Drew continues on. This game is called No More Chances. Alex, before we start, what were you doing before you came on our show? I stare up at him silently until Ryan again shoves me from behind, causing my already weak legs to give out, falling in front of the crushed women and onto the red stage. The crowd begins whispering amongst themselves. I don't know. You don't know? Minus a 1,000 points. Parts of the audience laugh. Drew keeps talking. You owe it to these women to remember. Look at them. I look down at the red stage, dripping sweat from the pain and buzzing lights. I whisper, I don't want to. Look at them. Drew shouts as two pairs of arms lift me up and face me towards the women sitting in the stools. They no longer looked pieced together, but sat frozen with looks of sheer terror. They stare straight ahead as the older woman extends her arm across the chest of the little girl sitting to her right, their faces lit as if bright lights sat pointed at them from feet to head. I begin sobbing, supported by Wayne's and Colin's arms, as I rested my weight against them. The pain throbbed throughout my body. My wails echo through the now silent crowd as the arms holding me shake me to my feet and leave me standing alone in front of the women. Drew instructs, now shoot them. His command pulls me out of my stupor and I turn my head towards him, his eyes no longer visible past the shattered lenses. No. I shout, I refuse to. I'm not going to cause their I fall silent and slowly turn to the women. No shots had rung out and I didn't pull the trigger, of that I am certain. But smoke rose from the barrel of the gun and the two women now lay on the ground, reverted to their broken state from before. The heat from the lights above feels searing. I feel something click into place but still didn't understand its meaning, like a blind man completing a jigsaw puzzle. Only after a few seconds did I realize another sound had begun to build while I was focused on the sight in front me, but once I noticed it, it filled the vast room instantly to ear-splitting levels. Sirens. Clack. Tilde. My eyes opened to the red and blue painted canvas being the only source of light. No longer static, the red and blue pulsed, quickly growing brighter and then dimmer, independent from the other color. The chairs sit empty on the ceiling, silhouetted against the glowing canvas. Wait, no, that wasn't right. I peer around from my position on the darkened, red carpet. Seeing the entire studio seemingly attached to the ceiling made me realize I was the one upside down. I look back towards the flashing red and blue canvas, but now I am surrounded by a jagged metal frame and glass has been shattered across the carpet. My hands grip the steering wheel before me. Hat. That's right, We pull suggestions from the audience out of this hat here, and our contestants have to act out what is written on the cards. I look to my right across the passenger seat and see Drew sitting at his desk on the ceiling. His eyes still obscured by his lenses, each now independently reflecting the flashing of the red and blue from the canvas as he talks through the rules before repeating the last thing you want to say to a police officer after he walks up to your car door after an accident. I look away from him and stare into the flashing canvas and begin to sob again as my grip tightens around the steering wheel, creating sound. My tears run dry and through shuddering breaths I say, I didn't deserve the chances everyone gave me. Clack. Tilde. A cool breeze flows through my missing windshield as the red and blue of all the police cars surrounding me reflect against the shattered glass on the road. Pain radiates through my body for every millimeter I try to move. All the trash left in my car now rests on the ceiling, mixed with old bags of fast food, little baggies, and empty bottles of vodka. Ahead of me lies two headlights of another car, miraculously still working despite having been smashed in, so they now faced each other. Still buckled in were two women, one older and one younger, unrecognizable from their former beauty. Alex. I shift my eyes to my left and see an old, family friend with anger, pity, and sadness mixed into his face. The officer shouts at me, "Boy, I just saw you were in outpatient and you swore to me you were done with this kind of living. We all rallied around you and this is what you do? What do you have to say for yourself?" I shift my eyes back ahead, the image before me being burned into brain. I can only cry with each sob sending blinding pain through my body. What else is there left to say? Tilde. I finish retelling my experience to my mandated therapist. She nods along and spouts reassuring platitudes as I look at her sideways. The pain is gone now. Now I just feel nothing. More of an emptiness, actually. She finishes and stands up to leave, and I reach out for the controls for my chair with my mouth and blow into them. I make my way back to my cell with an escort at my side. Pointless, really. What am I going to do, run away? My cell door locks behind me, and the escort continues on down the hallway. I look out the window at a stone courtyard as the other inmates mill about. The guards down the hall flip on the TV, it's time for their favorite show. The music from the two-piece band flows into my room and the charismatic voice of the host follows after it. Story 11, A Guide to the Perfect Murder. Nobody had gotten it right so far. I'd left tips, hints and goddamn step-by-step instructions, yet they still failed to put the pieces together. If I wanted someone to follow in my footsteps, then I was going to have to just post it in its entirety. Muffled screams filtered into his conscious from just behind him out of view, only broken up by choking due to the damp rag rammed halfway down her throat. SHH, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you, your time is coming, I'm just inviting others to join in on the fun. Her eyes widened with pure fear, as the realization that she would never leave this room alive. Opening up his favorite app, he began to typing. I wouldn't say I do this as a profession, people get paid if it's their line of work. I however have made a hobby for myself disposing of people. I'm very efficient in what I do, I choose my targets wisely, and as of to date I haven't been close to being under any suspicion, and I don't intend on that changing. I have chosen to write this as I frequent no sleep daily, and I'm beginning to see a worrying trend in flaws people describe when dispatching of a character within their stories. Hopefully this will guide someone to be a bit more accurate and take pride in what they are doing/writing. You don't need to know how long I have been doing this for, but you have probably come across one or two of my targets. Unless decided by me, the targets are usually still assumed missing with no evidence of foul play. I pride myself on this. I will explain why it is beneficial to allow one or two bodies be found later on. Smiling as I type, reaching behind me I stroke the head of my defenseless bound guest. Typing. So let's begin. Before anything, never do this in your hometown, always pick somewhere at least 30 miles away, never travel the same route to and from the town, and change your vehicle regularly. Pay for cars in cash and always from neighboring towns. The target. Unless you are choosing a family member, colleague, friend or enemy. Always take your time in deciding the target. This can take days, weeks or months. They need to have particular characteristics if you are to be successful. They need to be social, but not a party animal. You want them to go out after work with a few friends but not be the last ones in the bar. Never approach them while they are out at this point. Do however take note her footwear, whether they are usually shoes, trainers or heels. This can make a difference. Take note what shoulder she carries her bag, what hand she prefers to use, does she smoke, where she usually keeps her phone, how often she goes bathroom while out, her routine when she gets home, who she lives with, are her neighbors active. If anyone becomes suspicious of you at this point, abandon this target and move on to the next. Gazing down at the whimpering girl at my feet, I smile. It had been so easy to take her, she barely struggled. Granted, she didn't really have chance. Typing. Prep. You need somewhere not in the same town as your target and certainly not your hometown, nor a rented building. You will need to own a small lockup, somewhere discreet, somewhere that will not raise suspicion. This is the crux of keeping things low-key. Take your time finding your lair. If successful, you will be spending many an amazing day here. Do not keep your tools here when you are not here. Your tools should be kept in 3 locations picked at random. I prefer waterways tied down below the surface in Ziploc bags. The only thing ever left in your lockup will be your target, and this is only once they are dead. The entire time they are alive you are not to leave them. I have never left any of mine and I swear by this rule. Besides, why would you want to leave? I mean, you have so much you can do. Every vehicle you own, ensure they are road legal and won't bring any attention. Always pick black, red or grey cars. They blend in easier and on the whole are more generally looked over. She begins to thrash all of a sudden. Everybody has that last fight in them when they know it's their very last chance, and believe me, it's the hardest a person fights when it's literally for their life. Fuck you. Let me go, you bastard. Fucum fem mph. Those were her last words as I re-secured the gag. Her hands clambering at my face, trying to grab hair. With a swift strike from my claw hammer she hit the floor hard, still breathing but barely. I turn back to my laptop. Typing. Self-prep. Live by these rules. Keep your hair short. Cut your nails. Don't hunt when feeling unwell. Always keep medical gloves, wear them at all times even during surveillance. Find a color closest to your skin color to avoid unwanted attention when parked. Exercise. A dead body is incredibly hard to move on your own, unless you break it down into parts like I have begun to do. As well as tools hidden, you need extra clothes hidden with them. Always account for time to take these to a laundry service after use, or buy new clothes each time. Never name brand and always generic. Taking the target. Once you are confident you have secured a potential target, you need to map out when will be the ideal time to take them with minimal risk of being interrupted. This should be relatively easy as you have been following them for a while now and should know their routine. If you do not, continue surveillance until you do. I prefer chloroform on a cloth or napkin, but if you want to use a variety of other methods, contact me directly for my opinions. On the way, pick up your tools. This is the moment you are most exposed with tools in the vehicle. Drive safely and be aware. Ensure you take all traces of the target with you, so shoes, handbag, receipts, hairpins, badges, lanyards, everything. Take the battery out of their phone. Wipe down the phone, then take your time melting the phone down to nothing with a blowtorch. Before doing this, ensure you have taken the following numbers: home, work, and 2 numbers from their recent call list which are frequently called. Get the password from the target however you need to, but it has to be done before you get to the lockup. She began to stir. This part of the guide I'll leave out, an amateur could never pull this off. I untie her and open the door. Typing. Once you have successfully got to the lockup, ensured no one is following by taking diversions along the route, and scoped out the lockup before entering, then you can take the target inside. Once she is inside, I'm not going to tell you what to do. We all have different preferences and I don't want to limit your imagination. It goes without saying, when you purchased the lockup, the first thing you did was make it soundproof, so really unleashed now, you have earned it. She comes around to the sight of an open door, scrambling to her feet. Still dazed from the blow of the claw hammer, she makes her way outside. I appear at her side. Listen closely, there is a car at the other end of this forest. If you can get to it, you are free. If you can outrun me, you can live. If you stand and fight me, you will surely die. Without another breath, she takes off into the forest. I head back to the laptop. Typing. Disposing the body and covering tracks. Once you have used up your target, and have your fill for now, it's time to wrap up this little adventure. By now she should be dead. If not, finish her. The easiest next step I recommend is dismembering her, at the knees, hips, torso, neck, shoulders and elbows. Piece by piece drive out to somewhere secluded, set up a makeshift barbecue and grill the meat, burn it beyond recognition, put out the fire, drop some bits of prime raw steak purchased from any butchers to attract wildlife quicker, then leave. This can only be done for the little pieces. When you get to rib cage, pelvis, thighs, spine and skull, you will need to burn to charcoal, then crush down the bones. Do this over a few days and spread out where you do it. You will need to purchase a few burner, used pay-as-you-go untraceable phones for the next part. Over the next few months, periodically travel upwards of 50 miles from the location you took the target and use these phones to text the taken numbers from earlier. Do not get imaginative with the texts, just hi, I'm fine, we are happy now, this is for the best. I love you all. Never use the same message for two targets and never use the same phone twice. Treat this the same way you did the target's phone. I make my way atop my lockup to my scouting spot. This is what I do it for. Lining up my scope, I trace her as she sprints across the forest towards the car. She was so close. With one shot she goes down. Typing. That's pretty much everything. I'm actually writing this while taking notes for my next target already. I'm on a streak and need another. Keep an eye out in the news. I'm going to let this next one be found. Here's a hint, it's me. She's going to have brown hair, petite frame, greenish eyes and goes to college. Oh, I was going to tell you why I allow some to be found. Because this is my patch and serial killers rarely hunt where someone else is already targeting. So leaving the occasional body with the same fake mo should keep others who are tempted at bay. Anyway, she's just about to leave for the train station, which is my key to take her. Sorry for any typing errors. After all these years I still struggle to type in gloves. I close the laptop, pack up my notes and head to the car, leaving her body in the forest. I have no concern she will be found as I own this land and rent it out. Driving out the front gates, I adjust the rear view mirror. The sign my land tenants had put up comes into view. Forensics, environmental effects, body farm, access strictly prohibited.